And welcome back to the Touchline Talk Show. It is time for MLS NWSL playoff preview. Starting with MLS, I'm going to go in chronological order of the times these games are being played. So that means we begin Thursday with the Eastern Conference matchup. FC Cincinnati coming off their win in, New Jersey against the New York Red Bulls at number one seed Philadelphia Union. The storylines for these games write themselves. It's been the conversation the other times these teams have already played this season. Cincinnati, at least reportedly, tried to hire Jim Curtin, did hire Chris Albright, did hire Pat Noonan, did acquire Ray Gaddis, did acquire Sergio Santos, all from the Union. They don't exactly play the same way, but the tenets of everything the Union have done to build themselves into this incredibly successful, sustainable franchise is trying to be replicated by these former Union guys in Cincinnati. Cincinnati show up in the playoffs for the first time, get their first playoff win, and so it's just only fitting they now have to go to Philadelphia and go through the Union to get where they want to be with all of these former Union people now in Cincinnati. Couple things I want to mention here. The Alejandro Bedoya injury situation does not sound good from what I've read. I would be surprised to shocked if he starts. I'm not convinced he's going to be in the 18. We'll have to see. I'm also debating how much of a concern that is for me from a Union perspective. Part of me loves Jack McGlynn and thinks it's not that big of a deal, and part of me is well aware that that basically they lost the supporters' shield when Bedoya got hurt from a results standpoint. Because there was a moment they were in control of it, and then they had that bad game in Charlotte, and LAFC did enough. Though it is worth pointing out, if this was basically any other league in the world, the Union would have the supporters' shield via goal difference. But it is not. It goes by wins, and therefore the Galaxy or LAFC have the supporters' shield. So there is an argument, even though the Galaxy have all this to say, there's an argument, even though the Galaxy, even though LAFC, this is what happens when you try and multitask, LAFC won the supporters' shield, there is a real argument. Yes, I just wanted to confirm goal difference there. Yes. There's a real argument LAFC, even though they won the supporters' shield, weren't actually the best team in the league if you look at goal difference. But MLS goes by wins. It is what it is. Just wanted to make that point when you're talking about who is the best team in the league heading into the deeper rounds of these playoffs. All that to say, so there was a moment very briefly where the Union were in control from a points per game standpoint of the supporters' shield. They had that loss in Charlotte. LAFC did enough down the stretch to get back to a point where they were in control because of the tiebreaker. And that happened during Alejandro Bedoya's injury. He does all of these unquantifiable things for the Union. And so ultimately, I'm on a scale of 1 to 10, my concern is a 6. I'll go that high with it. What is going to determine this game for me is Cincinnati's front three against Philly's back line, Jose Martinez and Andre Blake. Specifically Martinez in the back four. So I'm just calling it a back five. Martinez is there to limit the effectiveness and to track players exactly like Luciano Acosta. And this is, without a doubt, the best defensive unit this league has ever seen. Cincinnati's attack has been fantastic. And it allows them to get away with some defensive mistakes because they are so good with that front three. Brandon Vasquez is continuing to make people ask Greg Berhalter why he's not a factor in the U.S. men's national team. Brenner struggled in his postseason debut. You got to think he's going to be much better in this one. So that's what this is going to come down to for me. Is if Cincinnati's front three have their way and they are loud and causing all kinds of issues, Cincinnati has a really good chance to win this game. If Martinez is able to disrupt sort of that connection between Acosta and Vasquez and Brenner, if the Union center backs do what they've done all season and are able to really sort of smother those two forwards, then it's going to be a tough go for Cincinnati. That's what it's going to come down to for me. If the best players on the field are Cincinnati's star attackers, they got a really good shot. If the best players on the field are the Union's defenders, Andre Blake or Ura or Gazdag or one of the Union attackers, Cincinnati is in trouble. So that's what I'm looking for in terms of how does Cincinnati find a way to pull the upset? They got to win the battle with that great Union backline. Or at least do enough. I don't see the Union getting shut out at home. If you can score a goal, hold on, and then get to extra time penalties, that's another way to do it. But it's ultimately going to come down to who wins that battle between one of the best attacks in the league and the best defense in the league. Next, we have the one and only El Trafico. Got to get one more in there before they play in the Rose Bowl. First and foremost, well, maybe not foremost, but the thing I'm most interested in. What lineup does Steve Cherundolo put out there, and how does he use all these players? I talked about this after they won the Supporters Shield. The easy part is figuring out how to do it over 34 games when guys have injuries. You're going to rotate your squad some anyway. That is set up to allow a team built like LAFC to succeed. Now you got 90 minutes. Your season is on the line against your arch rival, and you can't play all of your best players. Does Cherundolo sort of stick with what got him here and bring Gareth Bale off the bench? Or is this the moment where we've been waiting this entire time, ramping Gareth Bale up? You had the luxury of not needing to force him into anything because of all these other great players you have. But the whole point was to bring him in for the playoffs. So does the switch get made? I am really curious about this. To me, this is one of the biggest storylines of the postseason. In terms of what's going to determine this game, I have two big questions. And I'm going to stay... The obvious thing is to point to the stars. Ricky Puig, Chicharito, Carlos Vela, you can go down the list. That might be where the game gets decided. But I want to go somewhere else, and that is first, what do the LA Galaxy get from their wingers? Because this is the difference between the two teams. Now, LAFC's midfield does not have somebody like Ricky Puig in there. I'll acknowledge that off the bat. But the Galaxy have Chicharito up front. And LAFC have, Dennis Bouanga and Arango and Carlos Vela and Gareth Bale. You can go down the list. The wingers. Grancier, Cabral, and Douglas Costa all have not been very efficient in front of net, not been very confident in the final third, let the Galaxy down at different points. They have not been anywhere near as reliable as LAFC's supporting attacking players. You're going to need something more than Puig and Chicharito to beat this LAFC team. There's every chance that one decisive moment falls to somebody not named Chicharito. Or that player needs to make a good decision about whether or not to get the ball to Chicharito. Something. Can they deliver? They don't have to be the best players on the field. But do we walk away from this game feeling like they were a real negative for the Galaxy? Or are we pleasantly surprised by what they were able to do and the impact they were able to make? Again, they don't have to carry the team. You got guys to do that. You got the firepower. But you need more than two guys to play with this LAFC team. And then number two, I'm going to talk about this until the end of LAFC season, and then I will probably talk about it after LAFC's season ends one more time. And particularly in this game, because it has a tendency to be just unbridled chaos. Does LAFC have to go off script? Can they get this game to go the way they want to? Get the first goal, press high up the field, control things from that, that way they want to play, and be able to, use their midfield to cover all of this ground, do the things their midfield is great at, get the ball to Carlos Vela, all of that stuff? Or is it a repeat of what has happened in the past on a couple occasions where the Galaxy strike first, and all of a sudden you got to sort of rewire everything? This is my question about LAFC, outside of what I already talked about in terms of the actual roster. Do you have a plan B? I talked about this with Spurs. It's a little bit different, but it's the same idea. Can you, because there just is nothing predictable, and it is so hard to control the circumstances that get thrown your way in the MLS playoffs. It's the beauty of this competition. There is no rhyme or reason to anything that happens, it feels like. Can you dig yourself out of a hole if you go down a goal? Can you win an ugly game? And I don't think it's going to be this one, but this is something else they've really struggled with in the past under Bob Bradley. Win that ugly game where you don't have everything, it's choppy, it's a bunch of just sloppy play in midfield. You're not able to get this smooth flowing attack going. It's probably going to happen at some point. Can you win a 1-0? Can you adapt to whatever gets thrown your way? Because if we've learned anything about El Tráfico, there's always something. And LAFC have gotten steadily a little bit better at that. But this game is, and I do think they're better prepared for this, the way they're playing this season than under Bob Bradley. But to me, it was not a coincidence they struggled so much in this matchup under Bob Bradley, because these games were everything he doesn't want. It's just a bunch of craziness. If we get that again, I'm curious to see how LAFC respond. And to me, the first goal in this game is going to be huge, and it's going to set the tone. I know that's true of every game, but particularly this one, because there's a way LAFC want to play, and not that they, of course, they're capable of coming down from a goal. But I have a hard time seeing the Galaxy digging themselves out of a hole. But I said this before, I want no part of this matchup if I'm LAFC. I picked the Galaxy to win this game. We'll see if I come back to regret that. But those are the things I'm looking for in this matchup. What is the actual starting 11 for LAFC? What do the Galaxy get from their wingers? And does this go to plan for LAFC? And if not, how do they adapt? Then to the other two matchups on Sunday, starting with NYCFC at Montreal. Both these teams advancing in comfortable fashion. Montreal took a little while to get, both teams took a while to get the opener, but then they really cruised after that. NYCFC bringing an end to Gonzalo Higuain's professional career. Congratulations to him on a phenomenal season for Inter Miami and what he was able to turn this final season into. He deserves a lot of credit. Wanted to mention that quickly. On to this actual game. First thing, what role Talles Magno, Tavon Gray, Keaton Parks play in this game? Do they play a role at all? Now, Keaton Parks did get on the field in the last one, so you got to assume he's going to play a role. But Talles Magno is huge, and I mentioned this in my MLS playoff preview. In a world without Tati Castellanos, you need somebody to be that high-level elite attacking player. As good as NYCFC are kind of across the field player to player. They're so well balanced. They give you a little bit of everything. You need the difference maker. That's why they spent this money on Magno. That's what he's been this season to a large degree, sort of taking over that spot. And if you don't have him, I mean, they looked great against Inter Miami. They can win this game without Magno. My concern was more when you get to the final couple rounds, I just don't think they have enough firepower to repeat. But my pick, and I did pick them to win this game, my pick might change if Magno is not in the 18. The other thing I will say, though, and why I picked NYCFC to win this game, apart from everything I like about them, and feel even better based on their performance against Inter Miami, the crowd in Montreal was great. This is not about Montreal being an easy, quote unquote, easy place to play. This conversation you're having about, the fact nobody showed up for the New York Red Bulls home playoff game. Montreal was a fantastic atmosphere. Those fans delivered. I'm just not scared of playing CF Montreal in Montreal. Look at their record. I would much rather go to Montreal than go to Philly. I said again in my playoff preview, if Montreal can get past the home games, I like their chances a lot. They've been sensational on the road this season. There just isn't, their game translates really well. But it doesn't give them a massive home field advantage. So for an NYCFC team that went and played in Portland for MLS Cup last season, played in Philly in the Eastern Conference Finals, they're not going to be fazed by this. It's going to be a great atmosphere. I'm really looking forward to this one. That's the second point I want to make, though, is I feel fine if I'm NYCFC with the way this played out. What I think is ultimately going to determine this game is the midfield battle. Whatever variation that ends up being for NYCFC, can Maxi Morales be the guy to pull the strings? In Montreal, Jordan Mihailovic, Ismail Kone, they're not the biggest names in the world, but they are so important to what Montreal does. And Montreal, you could throw, Romel Kyoto into the kind of what role does he play in this game as well. They don't have that elite striker that terrifies every single team they play. They've got guys who can score goals. Be it Kyoto, be it Kai Kamara. But Jordan Mihailovic has to be the difference maker. And Ismail Kone has to be kind of that secondary difference maker, that other guy who could step up the way he did in this first playoff game. If NYCFC are able to neutralize those two guys, I really like NYCFC's chances. That's what this is going to be ultimately decided by from my perspective. So definitely keep a close eye on the midfield in this one. And then rounding it out, we've got a Texas derby, if you want to call it that. FC Dallas at Austin FC. Dallas get through, both of these teams got through on penalties. Leading to my first question, which is, which team shows more attacking intent? Dallas definitely had the better of the play overall against Minnesota. Weren't all that inspiring, though. And Dallas, again, certainly had the better of the overall play, but were also, down 2 goals by that point. And they found a way to get the goals. But it never felt inevitable. It never felt like it was this onslaught of just good chance after good chance, and ultimately one of them was going to go into the net. I never felt that way watching that game. Austin have to be much more efficient, much more effective in attack to beat FC Dallas. This is a different level of opposition than RSL team that was missing some key pieces. It's also worth noting both meetings between these teams this season ended in draws. Dallas Blue leads in both. Austin have been, I believe they are the best team in MLS. If not first, they're up there in terms of coming back from losing positions, picking up points. Comeback wins, stuff like that. This is not something that is specific to their games against Dallas, and they just showed again against RSL. But if I'm Josh Wolf, I don't want to try my luck. You got away with it once, and you got the help of a red card. And on the Dallas standpoint, to make a run, you got to find a way to hold a lead. So that is a really interesting aspect of this game for me, is if you're Austin, can you not fall behind for once? And if you're Dallas, can you continue to at least give yourself a chance to keep within striking distance? Ideally, can you get that first goal and really take some air out of the building and cause some stress? Because that was ultimately kind of the thing, and Taylor Twellman kept harping on this during the Austin game, and he was right. It just never felt like Austin had a real solution, that there was a real sense of urgency. If they fall behind again, they're certainly capable, but I'm not convinced they're just sort of inevitably going to find a way. As good as they've been this season, as good as that attack is. So that is something really notable to watch for in this game. Is both other meetings have played out to a similar story. Do we get a repeat of that, or does the story change here this time around? And then finally, do Dallas's difference makers show up? Sebastian Driussi is going to show up. I don't have a doubt about that. You got to have somebody to sort of hang with him to compensate for him. Jesus Ferreira missed a sitter that would have avoided this penalty shootout for Dallas, and did not have a particularly great game. Paul Arriola did some good things. Alan Velasco didn't have it. Those front three were not spectacular against Minnesota. You got to take it to another level in this game. It's a better team. You're on the road. It's a much better offensive team as well. So, can you get the best out of these guys? And it's also worth pointing out, Philadelphia, no USMNT guys that are going to the World Cup. Montreal, I don't think Jordi Mihailovic is on the plane, so no USMNT guys going to the World Cup. NYCFC, don't think there's any USMNT guys going to the World Cup. Cincinnati, maybe, again, if you're asking me, I don't think they have any. Go to the Western Conference, LAFC, okay, Kellen Acosta. Austin. And that's your playoff field. Jesus Ferreira, Paul Arriola. Can somebody from this U.S. men's national team continue to play in the postseason and actually make a deep run to an MLS Cup or something, so that everybody isn't sitting around for, it'll be just under a month at that point. But you're quickly running out of USMNT players still in this tournament, which is another part of this for Dallas, is those are the guys who need to deliver, and it benefits the U.S. men's national team if they do and Dallas is able to advance. All right, that is all for MLS. Now jumping to NWSL. We are already in the semifinals. San Diego getting the better of Chicago thanks to an Alex Morgan goal. First question here, how do Alex Morgan and Taylor Korniak respond to having to play all of those minutes, coming off of those injuries? It wasn't like they played 60. They played over 90 intense playoff minutes. We're thrown right back into a grinder of a game. Are there any repercussions for that? because San Diego needs those two players to be 100, as close to 100% as possible. It's a good sign they were able to go as long as they were in that game, and that there was no plan to take them out after 75 minutes regardless. Their team needed them, and they were able to deliver. So that's a good sign in terms of their health. What were the repercussions, if any, of that, though? That's the first thing I'm kind of curious about. Second, can San Diego limit Portland in 1v1 situations? Malpew caused some havoc getting isolated against players in that first round game. Malpew is also one of the best, 1v1 wingers in the world. But Portland have Sophia Smith, also very good in those kind of situations. The job doesn't get much easier in terms of trying to stop these players. You went from one U.S. women's national team star to another one. For a Portland team that scores so many goals, you gotta limit those opportunities. You gotta be fundamentally sound defensively. You gotta be able to get over and get that extra player in position, whether it's to block a shot, to make Sophia Smith think twice about shooting, whatever it might be. Can you keep her kind of corralled, and can you keep bodies around her? And maybe it's not even her, maybe it's, somebody else. But can you avoid those isolation situations? And if you're in them, can you avoid them being incredibly damaging to your team? Because that was what they were at least able to do. They survived, and eventually Mallory Pugh just ran out of gas. Now you got Sophia Smith. Third, I just put down two words. Kaylin Sheridan. To me, she is the X factor in this game. And that could mean two completely different things. That was a really bad mistake that gifted the Red Stars the opener. It's not the first time that has happened. She is also the best goalkeeper in this league. She can win you a game. She can save penalties. She can do it all. Can she avoid another one of those catastrophic mistakes? Can she just be more confident, make better decisions, playing out of the back and with her distribution? And if called upon, can she save her team a couple times in situations where most goalkeepers just can't? Because she is that gifted. That's the other part of this for me. I think there's a decent chance, for one reason or another, we're talking about Kaylin Sheridan at the end of this game. If I had to pick one or the other, I'm going to say that she really delivers and keeps San Diego in this game, maybe longer than they should be. But we will see. So those are my three things. Taylor Morgan, Alex Morgan, Taylor Korniak. How do they respond to these injuries after playing all of those minutes? Can San Diego keep these dangerous Portland attackers out of 1v1 situations? And what kind of Kaylin Sheridan performance do we get? And then finally, Kansas City Current went into Houston, got the win, which sends them to OL Reign, your number one overall seed. Very simply, my first thing here, can Kansas City weather the storm and take the crowd out of this game a little bit? Seattle doesn't have the Sounders in the playoffs, which I think is noteworthy in the sense that it's just going to help build momentum and excitement and attention for this OL Reign game. This is your postseason soccer, Seattle, and Seattle delivers when it comes to soccer environments, postseasons, all of that good stuff. I expect this to be a great atmosphere. The first thing you want to do if you're Kansas City is find a way to limit that a little bit, make that crowd uneasy. Whether that's ideally, scoring the first goal, but even if it's just avoiding something in the first 25 minutes of the game, being able to settle it. The second thing I want to point out here, Kansas City had the lowest goal differential of any playoff team. OL Reign had the second highest. This is very much an underdog going on the road to face a clear favorite. So you gotta, and that kind of goes into, I'll just throw the third thing out for here right now too. Kristen Hamilton, CC Kaiser, Kansas City Strikers. Can they take their chances? Everything suggests this game is going to be dominated by OL Reign. They are the better team on paper. They're the more talented team. They're also the better defensive team. So, assuming this game goes to plan, I find it hard to believe Kansas City is going to be able to create all that many chances. They didn't create an exceptional amount of Houston. They did what they needed to survive. This is a whole different kind of test. In those moments where chances do present themselves, can you take them? Can you be incredibly lethal in front of the net? Because that's what it, to me, that's what it's going to take to have a chance. You've got to sort of defy the balance of this game and find a way to steal a goal, steal 2 goals, get a penalty, whatever it might be. So those are the things I'm looking at here. Is you know what you're up against if you're Kansas City. This is a team that's done a phenomenal job overcoming key injuries that would make this a little bit more balanced on paper if everybody on Kansas City's roster was actually available. They're not. They've done a terrific job finding a way and sort of, probably disappointed a little bit to end up as the 5th seed. They were even higher than that for a while. But here they are. They've got a playoff win under their belt. Got to have a big game from your attackers. Not necessarily in the being major factors in the game, creating all these chances, but they need to be at the top of their game. Those few moments, those half chances, can you steal something kind of out of nothing and give yourself a chance? Can you steal a first goal against the run of play? Something like that. Ultimately, I'm going to stick with the 2 home teams. San Diego exerted a lot of energy to get to this point and are still dealing with some injury stuff, even if, Alex Morgan, Taylor Korniak played plenty of minutes. Still find it hard to believe they're 100%. That's got to count for something. Portland got to rest after some of their players were, on international flights, all of that stuff. And I'm picking OL Reign to win this whole thing. I said at the beginning when they clinched the NWSL Shield, you don't see a combination of a team playing this well and a team that is this good this often. They kind of had this late season surge to win the Shield, which is where they were supposed to be all along, but they weren't. So it all clicked these last couple months of the season, last few weeks of the season. And now you got a home game against a team you should beat. I expect them to do that, and I think we're going to get the matchup of the best 2 teams in this league in the final, which is Portland and OL Reign. We shall see, though. That is all for MLS NWSL playoff previews for this next round of games.